Well, thank you all for staying. This is a good group for discussion. We wanted to take some time today to talk about leadership in our church, which is an ever-evolving and changing thing across all churches. And as you know, we are at a point where we are looking for more leadership and a time of change of leadership. So that's what has sparked the conversation for today. But we want the conversation to be broader than that, broader than just like, how do we find people to fill these leadership roles? So I thought it would be interesting for us to start off thinking about the changes in how leadership has looked in the church over the years, just to talk a little bit about our memories of leadership going back over the years. If you think back to when you were a child in the church or a young adult, think of who were the leaders? What were they like? How were they seen? What was their job? What kind of things come to mind? And I'm going to get Dan to take... There you go. I'm going to get you your microphone too, so if anyone has anything that comes to mind, who's coming to mind for you? Leadership in the past. Who were the leaders of the church? Even what, I can talk as you think, but as I was a child in the church, I grew up in the United Church. So our leaders were the elders and the stewards. That's what we had. We had a session that was made up of elders, and they looked after most of the pastoral care in the church and decision-making around kind of people things, and the stewards, of course, were the finance people. They would look after that. And when I was a young child, they were all men. But as things evolved, even through my life, as a young person in the church, the women came into the leadership roles, and I was even asked to be an elder myself when I was in high school. So that was one of the formational experiences for me in my life, that I got to be an elder. I got to be one of the people who would go around and go to those meetings and get on the inside of these church discussions and what was going on, and was responsible for visiting certain people in the church. So that was important to me. Those are some of my memories of leadership. What comes to mind for some of you? Grant Scott.
What comes to my mind is when I was a kid, is that the minister was the leader. That's all I saw. I didn't see anything in the background. I don't know what was in the background. If anything was in the background, the minister was the leader.
Interesting point, Grant. Yeah, for many of us, if we're not involved in leadership ourselves, we don't know what leadership is all about and how it happens and what goes on in those meetings. Yeah, there's just the one person who might be at the center of what we experience. Stand.
As a child, when I looked at leadership, I saw deacons, ministers, and then there was a bishop. Sometimes would come to visit at our church. I didn't understand all those levels, but I knew the names, that there was deacons, ministers, and bishop. And as a child, I guess I looked at it, I thought they were usually old. But of course,
compared to you,
my perspective has changed at this point. But anyway, along the way, as I was still quite young, all of a sudden there was quite a young minister in our church. That was Herb Schultz.
Yes, young
so
Herb.
That changed a lot, and I think in the whole perspective of that congregation. But anyway, over the years, those things have changed, and I see the changes as women in ministry as well, too. But that was my perspective as a child.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
This is it. This is a PK perspective, yeah.
Okay, preacher's kid speaking here.
I always thought of him like my dad is, the CEO, the leader of the church, But I knew that he had a lot of meetings, and I knew there was other people, but I always thought, all the decisions and a lot of those things came down to him because he was consumed by it, he was busy, and he was not at home, that much. So that's kind of what Grant was saying is that was an early perspective, I think, or just as a young child perspective too, that he was always gone in running of the church, I guess.
So lots of responsibility on the pastor, but somehow there were people in the background too, and you weren't quite sure.
Right, very early on at St. Agatha Church, when Dad was pastor, I do remember that there was one or two sitting up front with Dad when he would preach, or that there was, and I don't know if they were deacons or
a couple of wingmen.
Yeah, a couple of wingmen. I was in the back row, paying attention.
Right.
As a youngster in church, one of the things I remember was, attending the annual meeting, which was never done on a Sunday. It was usually done in an evening during the week. But comparing then and now, it wasn't as structured as it is now. It seems now we have more protocol. Your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted, and we're incorporated now. And so that's the difference that I see in when I was a youth. It was the elements were all addressed. Everything happened, but I think it's more formal now, or it's more structured more now. So
Interesting. Thanks for bringing that up. It's more of I don't want to use the word casual exactly, but a natural community of people rising to the responsibilities and working together on things, and not necessarily looking to what's on paper so much, but just doing what needs to get done. All the ingredients were there, you said. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Jamie.
My experience was quite similar to Luke's as a pastor's child, and I totally agree with what Grant said. The leadership was the pastor and the deacons, and Sunday school superintendents were pretty important. Yes. And once you had that core, the church functioned pretty well, I think. And I don't know how everything got done, but I think a lot of stuff got done. And my observation now is that we've added a lot of bureaucracy, and we're not getting really anything more done. In fact, I think we're struggling more to get things done sometimes. So I don't quite know what that means. Anyhow, that's observation.
Yeah, thank you. So today we're coming here at the end of a couple of terms in our formal leadership of the church. As some might say that our leadership has complexified over the years, or maybe it's simplified, but right now what we have is a board of directors with a chair, and the board, or the church council, as we might more familiarly call it, is made up of representatives of each of the key functioning bodies of our church. So around worship and Christian education and finance and trustees and care team and mission. Am I missing anything? So we have a representative from each of those, and then a chairperson who brings those people together once a month to make the decisions for our church. And then we have the elders, 3 people who gather with the pastor usually about once a month as well, to talk and to oversee the spiritual life of our congregation. And as of today, we are saying goodbye to Delores, who has served on the elders, and to Dan, who has been our congregational chair. So those 2 spots are open. And so we wanted to give them time today to reflect on their experience in leadership, and to just give us an inside scoop on what leadership is like at this stage of our church's life and what their experience has been. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan and Delores to talk about that.
Okay.
And I invite you two to come up. You can sit up here. Use your mics like this.
I think it should be noted too that Delores did a second term as elder, so it's been twice around the block for her, so it's been much appreciated. And also extended her term while Kara was on sabbatical, so that helped, and as did Dan. So they're in what, in my terminology, overtime. So we're thankful for your roles in that. So a little bit of Q&A so people have an understanding of what it means to be in your role. What have you learned about being in your role? And if there's somebody in here, is wondering what the job description is, like what have you learned about it, and what is it about your job that you would want to share with people?
Well, good. I see you have a cheat sheet too, but yours is a lot smaller than my mess. This is what it means to be in my role. It's not always pretty. So yes, I did 2 terms of a 3-year term. I felt that after completing my first term, my wheels were just starting, to spin less, and I was just getting going. And so I really was looking forward to actually doing a second term in this role because I was finding my way. And I think any work you get back as much as you put in, and I was really determined to try this role out, and my goal was to try and do it well. One of the things, or the major thing I think that drew me to this role, was one of the main job descriptions is to be of support to our pastors. And this was something that resonated with me, that this was something I could do. I could be of support. Of course, we're committed to pray for our congregation, and this doesn't always have to look or sound pretty, but that's something that we're committed to do as well, is to pray for our congregation and always have the congregation in our thoughts and minds and in our prayers. Of course, there's many to-dos. We keep the membership lists up to date. That's ongoing. It's not a once and done project. We share households of faith where we reach out in a systematic way to members of our congregation and pray for them. And we do share that responsibility. We assist in worship, with communion, with Peace Sunday, mostly in a way of being committed to support our pastor. So things like worship leading that I did today are not on the job description, but it was our way as elders. One of the things we talked about in our meetings was we wanted to be more visual to the congregation. We wanted to be more of a presence to the congregation. We do a lot of background, work, but how could we, do this background work but still be more present? And so we talked a lot about that as elders, and one of the ways that we did that was through some of our work as worship leading. And this was especially kind of came out with COVID because all of a sudden Kara was doing everything, and we could do this safely together in a way that we could start worship leading here at the church even when there weren't people here. Actually, it was a lot easier then to do it without people here. But so that was one of the things that we did. And it's not to say that the next elder who steps in automatically has to worship lead, because there's lots of ways of being supportive to the pastor as well as being present to the congregation. So.
The role of the board chair, it wasn't really something I stepped into. I kind of got it thrust on me. But I realized to be part of an organization, from time to time, you have to take on administration role or leadership role. Being on the board, it's more of the business end of the church, a bit more politics involved, a bit more drama maybe. It's all part of the church that needs to be done, and it's also part of the church I never really paid much attention to before. I realized things got done, but it was a learning curve. I didn't really pay that much attention to it. But it's interesting and it's challenging, and the board's not that scary to work with. They're supportive, well as the Mennonite Church is probably supportive in what we've done, what I've done. And I'm grateful for the time to have served, but I'm ready to pass the torch.
Well, while you've got the mic, what is it that surprised you about the role, or what is it that you learned in the role?
Surprised me. I mean, 3 years ago, no one could have anticipated COVID. I mean, that's been a big surprise, a big learning curve for everything we've done here. But we're coming out the other side. We have managed to get through it. And that was a big surprise to work our way through it. I don't know. Like I say, you're in the board. You're seeing a different side of the church than you do when you're sitting in the pew on Sunday morning. So it's a little bit more involved in a different aspect than what I normally saw from out there.
So what has surprised me? That I said yes to this position.
2 times.
Yeah. Not the second time so much, the first time around. So Grace Neeb, just not so long ago, said to me, because we were in Belize together on a mission trip in the year 2000, and she knows kind of some of my fears and interpretation around lots of things, but she said to me, when we were in Belize, did you ever think that you would become an elder of Wellesley Mennonite Church? And my answer was, not in a million years. But there was, I think it was Terry Gerber who asked me if I would be elder, and I told him I would think about it, which is the thing that you say when you want to say no, but you don't want to say it right away. And there was some kind of nudging that I couldn't ignore. And so I thought I would try it on. And I think I'm also surprised, with the personnel's hard work, that they haven't found anyone to say yes to this position, because my shoes aren't that big. And I've worked on the elders with many other wonderful people, that coming together as 3 with the pastor has been very meaningful. And I think that basically you just need an openness to learn and some curiosity, and maybe most of all, just be able to listen.
Is there a particular incidents in your time that has inspired you? Like, we're trying to encourage somebody to take the role, so is there something that you can get out of it? Because you're not going to put yourself behind something for 3 or 6 years and for it not to be somewhat inspirational for you as well.
That wasn't one of the questions, Dan.
Spontaneity.
Okay, you have to answer this too, but you get to think about it.
What was the question? What is there anything that's inspired you through it that that you'd pass on to others?
I think mostly this congregation, mostly the people here that I love. I want to see us. I want us to see us do more. I want to be part of that. And people here have been very encouraging, affirming. I think that's kind of what led me to keep doing the work in the way that I wanted to do it well.
And I have to agree with Delores about the congregation of the affirmation and the willingness for people to help and to encourage. When it comes to inspiration, we've done a lot in the last 3 years. We've accomplished a fair bit. Like Delores said too, we can do more. But one of the stories that affirmation, and it came from Delores a couple weeks ago. Over the course of the last couple of years, we worked out a rental agreement with Pam Weidman, and they're doing some exercise classes in our facility here. And they're back in here again doing Taekwondo classes on Tuesday and Thursday night. And it was encouraging to see before COVID, people, while the classes were going, there were people in the library looking at books. There was Anson was nice enough to put the screen out there. There were people watching other activities on the screen out there. COVID came, we kind of shut down. Now we're back again with the Weidmans here on a Tuesday, Thursday night. And Delores had a client who, when they found out that Delores went to Wellesley Mennonite Church, asked Delores to pass on to the board their thanks for allowing us, for allowing the Weidmans to use our facilities, because this person's child was in a Taekwondo class that the Weidmans are putting on, and they're so grateful for it happening in our community that they didn't have to leave town, and to willingness for us to let them use our facility. And I find that encouraging, very encouraging.
Okay, what else, because we may not be operating on the same questions, but what else would you have to wrap it up with while you have the mic?
Well, I have the mic, wrap it up. Well, let's face it, folks, if I can do it, the majority of you can. The once a month meetings, the board, it's not too scary to deal with. They're a pretty good group to work with. Wellesley Mennonite Church is a pretty good group to work with. There's a lot of emails going on through the week. It's a bit time consuming. I struggled with the emails. I struggled with the technology. Hey, let's face it, 3 years ago, who knew what Zoom and Skype was? I sure didn't. But we've come through it. And Wellesley is a pretty supportive church, and I think there's talent out there. And yeah, if I can do it, the majority of you can too, I think, with a little bit of encouragement, and there's lots of encouragement from the congregation.
I don't know how I want to wrap this up. I think for me, in this role, one of the most important things has been that anyone can do this. I think for me, what I've learned is that the most important thing is to set your ego aside, to work in humility. And I pray and I welcome humility, because these have been the moments in this work where have been my biggest God moments. So I think that this is an important role for the church and for pastors, and I encourage anyone to give back in a way that they're able in all the roles of our church, but specifically this one, I would say, is a role that I would encourage anyone to try it on.
Thank you. Earlier on, when COVID started, one of the biggest words that I remember Kara was sharing was pivoting, the ability to pivot. And in the roles of church council chair or elder, there are some things, job description things, but it doesn't mean that you have to actually, you can think outside of the box type thing. And I've witnessed that. I've witnessed it dealing with Dan in as health and chair or health and safety person, started off as pandemic response team, went to, that at first it seemed a little bit intimidating, but I can actually say, like, working with church council chair or church council and through the church council chair, it's not as intimidating as it feels. There's a respect and things that are done well there. And Dan, I think you did a fantastic job. And at some points, I think when COVID was really hot, which it's not gone away, but I think I spoke to you more than I spoke to Mary Ann. So
I hope not.
But anyways, there are roles like I was thinking about it last night. You shouldn't be intimidated, like, by the role. Like, take the role, and if you have more questions, ask Delores or ask Dan. That terminology of if Dan can do it, anybody can do it, came out of our leadership team meeting the other night, and I won't say who said it, but this person is chair of this staff relations committee. But anyways, really, if there's, consider it. Like, we're as I said to start off, we're in overtime. Like, personnel has been working hard at it, and now we're at a point where it's almost fitting that today is October 31st. This is their last day of their job, and they walk out. That being said, I know Delores is involved with being a Faithful Church thing as an elder, so we're still carrying that through. But think about it seriously, and it can be fun and invigorating too. So thank you. I think we want a round of applause for our.
Yes, thank you all. And when I said that about Dan, I meant that in the very best possible way, as he came with willingness to serve, and that is really what it takes. So in the few minutes that we have left, I'd just like to have a little bit more discussion. As Dan said, Personnel Committee has been thinking about this, praying about this, asking some people, putting it out there. You've seen it out there in the bulletin for months now, looking for people to step forward if they are feeling called to these positions. But it's not happening. So I'd just like to talk a little bit about what might be the barriers that are in the way. Are there assumptions that we need to counter? Why do you think we don't have leaders? And I've heard a couple of things arise so far. Things maybe it's around structure, like Ron said. Does it feel like things are more structured and complicated than they used to be, and people just don't want to step into that? Or I don't know, what comes to your mind when you think of why?
I have to wonder if we don't feel pressure to try to do what we've done in the past. And maybe that's not going to happen.
Okay.
We don't know what, we keep talking about the new normal. We don't know what that's going to look like.
Right, so it might feel like it's an impossible job.
There's no date that says now it's time to enter the new normal. But I think there's pressure, I shouldn't say that. I wonder if there's pressure to do what we've done in the past, and if so, we have to realize that might well change.
Well said, Grant. So to counter that assumption, we don't know what church looks like going forward. And so our leaders are not expected to recreate the past.
I think of two things. I think, sorry, just a second. I think sometimes people think about time commitments, and so if they're not terribly organized like myself, then sometimes the time commitment can sort of balloon into way more. And the other thing is that because we've been apart from each other during this pandemic, we don't see each other and we're not around each other in the same way. And so because we're not part of that body continually, we don't necessarily see ourselves as a group and a needed part of that spoke in the wheel. I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, so some disconnection that we're in the middle of right now,
Yeah.
and how do we come back together and function as a body? And time commitment. Of course, the personnel committee probably hears that often as I just don't feel like it fits in life right now. Yeah. Another thing that comes to mind for me, as I alluded to before, is age. I wonder what age we expect our leaders to be. And as I shared, for me, I had the chance to lead when I was quite young. But I'd also like to bring up the opposite end of the age spectrum. Do we expect that at some point people are too old to be asked to be leaders in the church? And I work with amazing 90-year-olds every day, and they never cease to inspire me with their capabilities and their wisdom and what they have to offer for leadership in the retirement home where I work, but also here in this congregation. I wonder if there are ways that we can support younger and older people than we might normally think of asking to lead us. Just a thought.
One of the things that when going through the Being a Faithful Church discussion and progression, I've really appreciated the leadership that Herb and Shirley have, because when we were talking about change, and this is obviously potentially a change, they've witnessed a lot of changes in not only as themselves, but in leadership. Like Herb, the things that you talked about, like, you know, men on one side, women on the other, you know, phones, things like that. And so I guess my point is that there is a role and a job description, but it doesn't, for each of these positions, doesn't mean that it has to be that way. Like we're evolving, and I think it goes to what's been said, that it's an evolving position. Put yourself in it if you've got the energy, and maybe we can make it fit, you know.
Yeah, just as the church is evolving, the leadership positions.
Yeah. Like Grant's point about we're coming out of COVID, and what's the new normal? I don't know. Nobody really knows. Maybe it's our job to help define those things. So don't feel that you have to fit yourself into the position. Put yourself in the position, bring the energy, and then we'll see where it goes, potentially.
Shirley.
Maybe sometimes do we have to think about the length of terms? Are we more flexible to change from a 3-year term to, well, give it a try for a year?
I think that's what Dan Gingrich signed up, a 1-year term that turned into 3.
I was also thinking back to my term as Congregational chair, and it was a very hectic time. Ray was leaving. We were searching for a new pastor. We had a lot of committees at the search committee. A lot of positions at the search committee was struggling to fill. And we had someone from conference come and speak to the board and suggested that way ahead of this time, that when you have a position, and you've always had the structure you've always had, and you have positions to fill, and they're not being filled and not being accepted, that maybe it's time to look at changing. So if there's something, I think it was youth or junior youth, or there were quite a number of, and that if that position is really valuable and no one's doing it, and then someone sees the need to have that done, they might pick up and carry the torch. So I think that he was talking about pivoting before pivoting was the go-to word. So we don't always have to do what we've always done because we've always done it. And I think that's kind of what Grant and a few people were kind of, if we need to change or if we can't we have to look at those things. We just don't do it because we've always done it.
And our leadership should come out of need. If we see the need, then hopefully we will. There will be a calling to fill it. Jamie.
Yeah, I think really appreciate what Grace just shared, and others also. Sometimes I've heard the comment that, well, our bylaws don't allow us to do that, and that sort of bothers me, and I'm wondering how we get a hold of amending our bylaws appropriately to give us more freedom so that we're not serving our bylaws, but that they are set to serve us and our needs in the congregation. So I don't understand that myself, so I'm sort of throwing that out again as a question.
Mm-hmm. Well, we did make one amendment to our bylaws this year, so they are amendable. So, yeah, it's a good thing to keep in mind that we aren't servants of our bylaws, but we need to figure out how we function best as a community and amend our bylaws accordingly.
Yeah, I would digress a little bit, but everything's on the table type thing, and Kara may share a bit more about it later on, but a couple weeks ago, we opened up the church to a funeral service for one of the girls that was on the baseball team, and we had constitutions and bylaws and whatever things that we had in place for it. There was a lot of pivoting done in the afternoon, but as I shared, I think with the elders and others, that it was mission accomplished in that the service, maybe it didn't go according to like masks on all the time and this and that, but I think it met the needs of somebody who needed, had a need, and it met that need. And were all the, like Ron said, were all the T's crossed and the I's dotted? No. But
we met a
it
need.
accomplished some things. So maybe we have to be able to be, like you're saying, and it's been mentioned, flexible, and as Grace mentioned, need to pivot, because the ultimate goal was met that day. Was it exactly the way we had intended it to be? No, but I witnessed some pretty cool things that afternoon. So
Yeah. Anyone else who I'd...
I'm not condoning not following the rules we have in place for the rest of the congregation. I said, just so you know, I'm not condoning not following the rules that the rest of us have to follow when we're here.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, where are we at? Is there anything else that anyone feels like should be said that you haven't had a chance to say as of yet? We intend to go from here, just sending people away to ponder, to listen for God's calling, to listen for any nudges in your own life or of other people that we might be able to call into these positions. I think we suggest that you talk with any of us who have been at the front here today as we move forward with this.
I would just finish up my part with just saying thank you to personnel. I know it's been an exercise for them too, going through to try to tap people, and but on the other end, if you have a little bit of an itch and maybe needs a scratch, like maybe if you have some questions that, hey, you know what, maybe this is something, ask Dan or ask Delores, or reach out to us, because like we do have vacancies as of
now
midnight or noon. So
yes, and we did talk when we gathered about our cultural reluctance to put ourselves forward for things. So if you're feeling a nudge from God, don't let your humility stand in the way of offering your service, because your community needs you.
Well, thank you, Jane, and also again, thank you to Dan and Delores for their time, Delores for double term, and I've appreciated learning from her, and I think Grant was an elder he was the last one before Delores to come off, so thank you for that, and so thank you very much. Maybe we should just close in a word of prayer.
Will you?
Yeah. Thank you, Heavenly Father, again for this opportunity to meet today. We thank you for the message we heard this morning about resurrection, and we thank you for that. We also thank you for past leadership, not only here but through our church settings, and we thank you for the examples they've set. And we thank you for challenges that lie before us. Sometimes they're daunting and can be, feel like it's impossible to fill, but we know that the impossible is possible through you, and we thank you for that. And I pray that if there's someone here today or listening that has a feeling of, yeah, maybe I could do that, then I would encourage them to reach out, and I thank you for the inspiration there. Thank you again for this day. We pray that you guide and protect us wherever we may be today and this week, and hopefully we have inspired some thoughts, and God, please continue to guide our thoughts. In your name we ask it. Amen.
Right. Thank you all for staying. Now let's continue this conversation and keep being the church together.